All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to have this panel discussion with the Huntsman Cancer Foundation team and Molly over at Zuri Group. I'm Patrick here, who is one of our lead project managers at Firefly. I am Taylor Shanklin. I'm the VP of Growth at Firefly Partners, and really excited to have this conversation about Huntsman and how you all reimagined your peer-to-peer program this year, because we talk to a lot of different nonprofits and a lot of organizations who are either thinking about getting into peer-to-peer and they're like, well, how do I do it in this weird year in COVID times? And then a lot of organizations too are asking us, hey, how do I reimagine things, right? And so I think you guys really set out with a new big vision. So I'd like to kick us off with first just going around and doing a quick introduction of all of our panelists today, and let everybody know on the phone too, if you're dialing in, we are going to be sending out the recording. So you'll get the recording of this discussion after the fact. And we want to keep this really open and an open dialogue and a chance for you to ask questions. We didn't do this as a big slide webinar because I think you've seen a lot of those. And we really wanted this to be a discussion and something where you can chat in your questions. So please use the chat, use the Q&A box in Zoom, and let us know what questions you have. But with that being all said, Jen, I'd like to start with you, just a quick intro, and we'll go around the horn and have all of our panelists introduce themselves.
Yeah, so I'm Jen Moreno. I'm the Director of Events here at Huntsman, and I've been here for 13 years now.
Awesome. Savannah.
Hi, I'm Savannah Dubal. I'm a marketing specialist in our marketing communications team, and I've been here about 1.5 years, and then an intern before that. Yep.
Awesome. Ashley?
Yeah, my name is Ashley Howell. I'm an events coordinator at Huntsman Cancer Foundation, so I work on Jen's team with our all of our events, and I've been here just over 2 years now. I just had my 2-year anniversary, so.
Cool. Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Let's hear from you. Molly.
Hi, my name is Molly Kelly. I'm Vice President of Digital with Zuri Group. And Zuri Group, you're probably wondering why Zuri Group is on this line with Firefly. We are a digital fundraising company, just like Firefly in a way. But we've been around for 14 years, and we have a staff of about 40 people now doing digital development, fundraising, and integrations. We specialize in strategy and technology implementations. And well, Zuri means beautiful in Swahili. So I like to say that we help beautiful people do beautiful things in the world. And we partnered with Firefly here. And I think we'll talk about that partnership a little later on in the panel.
Yes, exactly. So we came together, we brought our teams together and some different expertise and skill sets together and helped Huntsman reimagine some things. So lastly, Patrick, I'll pass it over to you.
Hey everybody, Patrick Julian. I am a senior project manager here at Firefly Partners, and I was the project lead on this one. And I've been at Firefly coming up on 5 years.
Cool. And at Firefly, so if you're joining us for the first time, you're not familiar with Firefly, we are a digital marketing agency that helps nonprofits with their online fundraising, with their digital marketing, with their websites. And so this conversation today is really about how our team and the Huntsman team and Zuri Group came together and really helped to reimagine SportsFest, which is a peer-to-peer program. So I'd like to kick it off and ask you first, Jen. Give us a little bit of a background on your program, on SportsFest and your peer-to-peer campaigns, and kind of like the history, and then what made you sort of go into this whole like, hey, we got to rethink some things mindset.
Yeah, so our Huntsman Cancer Foundation, if anyone doesn't know, we fundraise for cancer research here in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. So we began a program called the Huntsman Heroes in 2004, and we used onlineactive.com because at the time peer-to-peer wasn't really a thing, and it was very archaic. But the program grew every year, year after year, with running and cycling. And what we did was we took our teams, we trained them, but we took them to other events. We didn't have our own. And then in 2008, we purchased our first platform, peer-to-peer platform, and really saw fundraising take off. Because if you're in Utah but you have family in North Dakota, they were able to go online and ask people for funds and share things, share photos, share their story, share their why. And in 2010, we started our first ride. My background is in athletic events. So we started our first ride, 140 miles, very unique. But the reason why we started our own event was we wanted a community event that was, yes, based athletically, but we wanted people to wrap their arms around patients and survivors and people who've passed away and really kind of emphasize their why, what we were missing with our partnered events. So, and then we started a 5K because we wanted the running community to happen. And so they were two separate events kind of floating in the world. And we merged them in 2015, which created the Huntsman SportsFest because we wanted one big day to conquer cancer, to, basically let people know, even though you run or you ride, we are still a community with the same why to eradicate cancer.
Reminds me of when I first got into my first peer-to-peer event too. I think it was back in like 2008, and I was looking for a challenge, and I found a cause that aligned to that challenge, and did a writing event too. So then let's talk a little bit. And Savannah, Ashley, I'd love to hear from you too on this. What when you started thinking about 2021 and Sports Fest? Okay, so you had your ride, you had your run, and those things were enveloped in this one day. But you started thinking, maybe we need to add some more ways to participate, to be active. What was some of that thinking that led to the change? And then let's talk about a little bit about what that change is.
Yeah, for sure. So like Jen kind of talked about, these events have been happening, and obviously everybody's doing different types of athletic events. And we really did want to kind of encompass a big community event, because that's what our Sports Fest is. It's bringing people together from the community, whether they are an active runner, whether they show up on the day of to support somebody, they're cyclists. And with that being said, we wanted to kind of encompass more things going on. So as everybody knows, 2020 has been a little bit wild, but it's a lot of time to improve and grow. So our event was completely virtual this year, which really kind of threw us for a loop, because we had to reimagine an event that usually is, again, runners, cyclists, walkers, families, sponsors in person with us into a completely virtual format. And as we did that, we started to learn and discover, both with like our marketing communications and our event as a whole, what that event really could end up being looking forward as a hybrid event. And as we continued to talk and look at these different events, the way our registration went before is we actually had a main landing page, which people could come and learn about our event, and then they could register for the events, but they had to register on separate websites through our main landing page for those events. So our runners had to register through one website, and our cyclists had to register through another, along with our virtual participants, when we had to kind of deal with that happening last June, had to register through our running website. And we had a lot of things that were kind of difficult for us to explain and to portray through, and kind of trying to explain to somebody why they couldn't all fundraise together, because in that sense as well, it made it so fundraising teams were sport specific. And that's one thing that we really listened to our community and people, especially our sponsors and our big family teams, understanding that, they all want to fundraise for Grandpa Joe together. They all want to be on the same team. And we're able to take that time with 2020 and look at it and be like, okay, this is really important to our fundraisers. It's important for them, whether they're a cyclist doing 25 miles, they're doing 140 miles, whether they're walking with Grandma Joe in her wheelchair, they can do this together, and they can fundraise and represent this as a team and share their story together. So that's one big part of our push for looking at this kind of website revision, as we worked with Firefly and Zuri, as well as looking at the fact that we did have cyclists and we did have runners, and we added another kind of running distance. So we do a 10K trail run now, along with our 5K and our kids K. So we captured a lot of what we thought the community could be. But when we looked at, okay, well, how can we do more? And what can we revisit this as? So we looked at trying to get new events. And as you can see, we're at the Huntsman SportsFest, but we only had running and cycling. So we were trying to figure out how to better communicate that and how to grow with our community with the new things. So as we revisited it, we looked at different partners we had, different connections, the stories that we had heard, including a story from one of our patients who is really into the high fitness stuff. And she brought that in last year for our virtual event. And we teamed up with Spikeball. We teamed up with one of our really amazing lead volunteers who runs a volleyball tournament, and looked at a way to bring all of these together. And in that same capacity, that obviously means that we had to completely revisit a website and make it more user-friendly. So that was a really cool part, where we could look at and be like, okay, here was our vision, and here's all the things we wanted to do. Now, how can we do it? And that's really where the teams from Zuri and Firefly came in. So Sab, I don't know if you had anything huge to add to that, but.
No, I think you kind of nailed it on the head. I think the one additional thing when redesigning this website and talking through, we really wanted that why to show through, because although this is an athletic event, the cause and the why is why we do it. At Huntsman Cancer Institute, we just redid a whole new brand strategy, and our brand mission is because cancer is personal. And so we wanted that personal why to show through on the website, to show why our participants are fundraising, why people are donating to people, and really embody that in the virtual and online platform.
And I would say that the issue of wanting people to fundraise together, but across different activities and events, is a common problem. Many of my clients have this problem no matter what technology they're on. Most of the peer-to-peer tools out there, there's reasons why people want to have all their data for just one activity in one in one module, let's say. In Engaged Networks, one peer-to-peer site, in Blackbot, one team raiser, back in the Sphere days, in one friends asking friends module, whatever. There's lots of reasons why people want to have that for tracking financially. You want to have it all in one, but that does limit a lot of people from having these teams that kind of participate across events. And so what we did in partnership with Firefly was to kind of bring that all together and that experience into one site, so that all that operations and the management of those funds can happen, and people can actually, do these different activities together.
Right. Well, I love the tying that slogan, cancer is personal, that fits into the fact that you're giving people a way to participate in the way that's personal to them, right? Whatever sport they're into, whatever they like. And Molly, to your point, I mean, so this is an example of taking a physical sporting event and giving people almost like a do-it-yourself. So if you're familiar with peer-to-peer and you've talked or maybe heard someone say, oh, we should do like a DIY campaign. And a lot of times those campaigns can involve fundraising your way, right? So I think this one's really cool how you said it's kind of like a DIY in a way where it's like choose your sports challenge. Patrick, you've been helping to like lead and facilitate this project and get everything ready to go for launch. What else would you add on to this?
Yeah, I found this one to be particularly fun because not only did it have like the rebranding, trying to get that why across and trying to consolidate them, and it also expand the events just from, walking, running, and biking to now having spike ball, high fitness, volleyball, and the other sports, and even including the virtual. But then also on the technical front, how do we do this? Like, before, as Molly said, a lot of people silo their events into like one different event for each of the different sports. And now this was a new challenge of like, how do we make this like a really good user flow where everybody stays in here and it's tracked, and then we're able to manage it on the back end. We don't have 20 different events on the back end. We just have the one event, but at the same time, we can run the appropriate reports to understand that. So like who's doing what event and how they're participating. So that's why it was a lot of fun on both the design side of this, bringing in our designers and our senior developers to kind of think through that and talk about that why and how we can highlight that on the pages, but then talking through the user flow. Because I think at the end of the day, we had something like 30 or so different participation types. But I think when you actually go through the registration, it's a super smooth process and you would never really see that and understand that. So that's where it was really a lot of fun to jump into discovery with everybody, our developers and Molly's team and the Huntsman team to talk through that and to really think critically about like how we can, get that, process to go smoothly. And that's where I think it was interesting because for a little background for everybody, we actually both Firefly and Zuri both bid on this project, and then Huntsman came back and was like, "Hey, you guys both came with good ideas. Do you think you would want to partner together and like kind of combine those ideas?" We're like, "Hey, why not?" So then that's bringing those all the different, because they had a really challenging problem, and the tool, it was very flexible, but a lot of people weren't thinking about it in the way that we wanted to build it. And so bringing all the different minds together to think through it was a lot of fun, to get a really creative solution that like no one person like thought of by themselves.
Yeah. To be more clear on that, I know we're talking kind of, people are like, what are they talking about? But yeah, so Zuri Group has a long-time relationship with Huntsman from even like back in the Sphere days. And we were totally happy to partner with Firefly to help Huntsman meet this challenge, in these times. But just so you understand, like Huntsman has a business case that is unique from outside of the parameters of most peer-to-peer tools, and specifically the tool that they're using, the Engage Networks peer-to-peer tool. And so that goal was to consolidate, as they've discussed, consolidate these events into one event in order to improve the management of the event from the teams and operations perspective, promote participation in more than one event to the same people. They have many constituents who want to run and do yoga and be on a volleyball team. And also to support what Ashley mentioned, to support teams to grow across events. So we're the cancer killers, and we have people that want to run, and we have people who are doing the bike ride, and we have kids that are going to run the 5K, or excuse me, the 1K kids fun run. So those were the three unique challenges. And so the key to making that work for Huntsman was the ability to drive the questions that you're asking in that registration, to drive that experience based on those selections. So most peer-to-peer tools, right, we can ask all kinds of questions in our registration process, but it's going to be the same questions for everybody. But in this case, they don't want to ask someone who is choosing to register a kid for the 1K. They don't want to ask them, what volleyball team are you participating in, or what distance are you running? Because they know that kid is going to do the 1K. So what we were able to do is implement technology into the event, into the website, that asks some preliminary questions right away. Are you doing this alone? Are you doing it with a family? Are you going to do it with a team, let's say? And then it asks them, what events do you want to participate in? And based on those initial questions, what the participant sees on that registration process is driven by those answers. So that way it's nice and smooth and not confusing. If I'm telling you that I'm doing volleyball, I'm only gonna see volleyball questions. If I'm telling you that I'm just registering a kid, that's another challenge I want to mention. Then I'm only gonna get those kid things. I didn't list that in my list of challenges, and I know I might be taking your thunder, Ashley, but a challenge that we all know about is what happens when you just want to register kids, and kids don't have their own email address, and you just want to register them. Huntsman has a 1K fun run that just the kids are going to run. Sure, parents might run with them, but they're not actual registrants. It's the kids that are. So we were able to build the site to be able to allow parents to register kids, even a group of kids, a family of kids, to run that 1K and have them just be that guardian, not pay for themselves, but only pay that fee for the kids to be running in that event. So injecting that using JavaScript and really great logic that Jen helped me work out. We had this really matrix of information that we thought through to be able to drive what they're going to see and what that experience is based on those selections.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and that's a really specific challenge, Molly. What do you do with kid registrations? But I've been helping organizations with peer-to-peer since 2009, and that's something that is a constant challenge for people. So yeah. What are some other things like that came up? Let's get into this participant experience and, making registration easier for people to choose their own path. Because I like what you talked about the volleyball person only sees questions about volleyball. Tapping into the minds of, Jen and Savannah and Ashley, what are some other challenges that you internally at Huntsman said, this is something that we have been plagued with maybe year after year, and this year we really want to fix it, or this is something that we think is a challenge that we want to create a better experience for our participants and our donors around? What were some of those things?
So Molly mentioned the family registration. That's always a big one here.
Mhm.
You know, you have, one adult and 5 children or whatever that looks like. And so I feel like now that you can say I'm registered, the very first question is, are you registering yourself or with others? And it automatically kicks you into that opportunity to register other people. One volleyball registrant can register their entire team. One family that's running can register their whole running team. So that's been, because that literally is our number one question is, well, now I have to go in and I have to do the address for every child, and I have to do the email for every child, and I have to do all this. And so now with all the smart questions that Molly put together, it's so simple. And believe me, we tried to break it when we were like testing it. We were trying to be like, how can we screw this up? And because what are the questions we kept getting? And so that's kind of what our team did for a week. It's just really kind of any weird scenario that we could think of. And to be honest, in the middle, we switched a lot. Like we come up with some testing and be like, okay, wait, I got to go back to Molly and I got to ask her about this. And so I kind of worked a lot with Molly, and then Ashley worked a lot with Patrick on the design side. And so that's kind of how, because I feel like I get a lot of the questions of, the complaints. I guess I get more of the complaints than anybody does. So.
Yeah, and I think to kind of talk about that a little bit more too, like how Jen kind of talked about, I got to work on the design side a little bit more with Patrick and with the team overall. And it's interesting going into it because I kind of, looked at it and I was like, oh, I have all these visual things of what I want it to be. But then when you got into the nitty gritty, you really recognized what was important and what was noticed. And on our old website, it was very long. Our landing page was very long and there was a lot of words and you kind of got lost. And for us, we'd seen it so many times. So we were like, it's fine, it makes sense. But we got a lot of feedback from people, especially within our sponsors, because that's usually kind of where I end up helping people register, is that they would just get lost and they just would stop trying to register. And so they'd call me and I'd have to do it. And I'm like, okay, how can we do some of this along with sponsors who, the C-suite would be like, hey, this is what we're doing. And then their participants and their employees would come in and be like, what is this event? And we wanted it to better communicate to people like that, as well as our people within the hybrid front, because obviously there are people who, even if we hold that in-person event this year, won't join us. And we understand that and we want to create that experience. So as we looked at how we wanted to do this landing page, we sat with Patrick's team, and it was so awesome to go through and kind of go through discovery of what photos we want to do. What do we want to be more dynamic? What needs to be certain colors to pop more? And one, thing we did talk about, and Savannah kind of touched on this is a fundraising event. And a lot of people do come out and use it as just an athletic event because the 140 miles for our cycling is very specific, but we want people to come and land on our page and say, hey, I'm doing this, but also what is this? And wow, they're raising a lot of money, and who are these people? And we were able to capture a lot more of the mission in that design process and both condense it with less words, but also show more photos, be able to make it more dynamic. So you could see the participants and why they participated and the different events and who was doing what. And as we sat and did that I don't know if I recognized how big of a problem that was for us until we did sit and do that discovery and start seeing the pieces coming together and what really was important. And the website is interesting because it follows a similar format to kind of what we had before, but a million times better already. So we're familiar with it, but the user experience is better on the design front, which then leads into the fact where when they get into registration, it's already easier. It's already more simplistic. And then they get into registration. So it's, from the moment we get them onto that landing page, even if it's just a Google search through the registration process is seamless and it matches the brand. So
that's important. So let's do something fun. Let's pull up, Molly, I noticed you put the URL into the chat. I'd love it would you mind if we just like pull it up and talk a little bit more? Like, let's get into more of this participant user experience and design and get a little bit tactical here. Because I think it's really important to highlight, and Ashley, as you mentioned, how you tied it into the brand and the fact that if it's not easy, people will bounce. They're either going to call you, it's going to take a lot more staff time, or they're just going to bounce, right? And then they're not fundraising and they're not participating. So let's talk about maybe just kind of call out and highlight some things that we did. And Patrick, feel free to highlight some things too that you saw here as something that was specific and unique to creating this event really and making it really come together.
Yeah, Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
No, I was gonna say, I just have a quick, just this alone shows it's not just a run and a ride. And the fact that there's 3 pictures, I think you can automatically go, oh, volleyball, and our hope is that we have all generations, that we have from the littles that are running to, the older folks that, they have a volleyball loving family. And that's kind of what we loved about this first part.
So Jen, I was actually just going to echo that. One of the things that I liked about this design that, or Alex, our designer, put together is, it did go from a run to a ride to now we're trying to highlight how many more events you have and really make it more inclusive for everybody else. A lot of folks who don't know, oh, now they do yoga, they have volleyball, high fitness. Like I thought they just did a run. So that was a big fun point for us to be able to highlight right away.
No, I completely agree. I think one of the biggest parts too, as you can see when we were kind of navigating on that top part, is within the very first moment you hopped onto that website, you saw what the photos were we were doing, and you saw that there was a fundraising bar. And it's funny because we went back and forth on the color of this fundraising bar and the color of the bar filling it in, and how critical that was, because it brings your eyes straight to it the moment you hit it. So that was one thing we really wanted to do that was a little detail, but something that we discussed as a team was so important for us, because the moment you landed here, you might not fully know what the event is, but it's fundraising and it's dynamic. And that was a really important piece for us.
I like that. And I noticed too, you clicked on the video it pulls up, and I'm guessing that's some sort of like a mission moment or something that, again, at the time of them landing on the page and registering, you have the ability to share a story and again, connect.
Mm-hmm. And my other, we haven't had I don't know what it's called, where the top bar holds, where it just kind of like it's always like, there's always a constant register, there's always a constant donate. And then all of basically everything at your fingertips constantly. That was also something, again, small, but really kind of helped impact the website.
Yeah, the sticky navigation I thought was a good call, because it does help you get directly, like if you know exactly what you want to do, or if you're reading through the page and it's like you're seeing the impact and saying, oh, now I want to get started, like you have that call to action at your fingertips right away. Mm-hmm. You're never searching for anything. The what's your why, which we're coming up on, I actually thought that is one of my favorite parts. I think it was something that Ashley really pushed for us to think through. And it's really, as you've heard Huntsman talk about a lot, is, a big part of this is what's your why? Like, why are people doing this, making it personal? So I really love that this pop-up to really bring in those quotes and, have the faces and people there so you can make it a lot more personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that too. Anything that you all did, since we're on that section too, like when you click into the why, does it allow people to like it pop up and show a story with those individuals, pictures?
These don't. These are just the quotes. We did actually talk about that, but I think for this instance, we were talking about just having the quotes. But I think that's a potential for feature down the road is collecting more stories or expanding on the stories that are there.
Mm-hmm. And do you want me to go? These are dynamic, yes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, we use the APIs. There's actually the Engaging Networks API and then the peer-to-peer API to bring in those different amounts. So yeah, as people are going through the registration process and signing up and answering questions, they do auto-populate. So you see that impact in real time, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. We've got a good question from Marco in the chat I'd like to ask of the group. And then I've got some other questions. This has like this conversation and you showing this has kind of sprung for me. But Marco, he asks, really good question. How did you make this peer-to-peer fundraising concept work? Since usually the simpler the better, but yours feels more like a whole P2P program. How do you run adverts when it's not just like a 140K ride, but someone can choose between different activities? So maybe that's a little bit of a question, Marco, and feel free to chime in again around the communications and like the strategy around communicating how there's all these things happening in one event. Have you had any participants confused about that?
So so this will open. This will be opening up in a couple of weeks. So this is brand new, launching. But what we actually did was we watched what people did virtually, And that's kind of where this came from. Ashley mentioned how high fitness came to us from a patient who is just addicted to high fitness. And so she got her group involved. And what was really cool was she participates in a little town here in Utah, and they are they're very socially media oriented. And we ended up having 12 12 high fitness things happening simultaneously on our same virtual day. And they ended up raising $11,000. And one was in Colorado. We had one in Nevada. We met a ton in Utah. And so with that, we talked to a couple of folks that were really into spike ball, and they love, basically spike ball attaches themselves to an already happening activity. Well, we have the field, we have the space, we have all of the pomp and circumstance. And so after talking to them, they are joining us. And the great part is we have a partner, for example, with spike ball. They have their own community. So they're going to advertise it for us to their spike ball community, which is a community we currently don't have, which will be really great because, again, as we know, acquisition costs a lot of money. So in this way, it's an acquisition. It grows our event. It gives people who maybe are into spike ball now, but in 5 years they buy a bicycle, and they really love the feeling and the emotion behind the event. And so that is kind of how we're moving forward. Also with volleyball, the group that's going to help us with that, she is a longtime coach. She has a great list of volleyball players, and she's going to help us push that message forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Jen mentioned it earlier. This is really a multi-generational event. Anywhere from grandma who might want to walk a 5K to her son who is a 140-mile hardcore cyclist, to his wife who just wants to run a 5K. This is a family event. And as you know, not every family member likes to do the same thing. So you have to kind of meet those needs, and everyone kind of has their unique skill set. But so I think that's what's so special about this event. There really is something for every single person, no matter how old they are, to participate.
Yeah. I like that you said that it's a family event and a community event. Ashley.
I think too, Mark, I kind of noticed that you talked about, where it says the simpler the better. And we started with the one big event. We started with this cycling ride. And I feel like, Jen has been here for a while. And as she started that, really made sure to make that the signature event. So as we move forward, our Sports Fest really does have those signature pieces of the run and the ride that I would kind of say are the bread and butter of the event right now. And those have been mastered, and those are recognizable, and people understand how they work. And now we're beginning to play, for lack of better phrasing, because that's what we're kind of calling our new area, with new sports. And so we have the run and the ride being those capstone events, and those will continue to be the capstone events. And then we started implying, so Molly, as you kind of went over that event details, and I haven't touched the pages as in depth, so they're not as pretty right yet. But you can see that there's a run, a ride, and a play page. And the run and the ride, again, being the bread and butter, are the big pieces that people know and they understand those. The play, as we begin to hear people who are doing high fitness, the people who run a volleyball tournament already, for our fundraisers and for us, especially in planning, those are low risk events for us to bring on right now because people are already doing them. They're already familiar with them, and they're not a high cost to us. So we can continue to look at hosting and putting our money into the things that we know are working as we continue to discover and navigate those other things that will bring in that multi-generational and community kind of partnership for us. So.
What are some things that you have planned for keeping people engaged? So you're launching in January, and then people are going to be able to do a multitude of different fitness activities. What are some things you have planned to keep the community of these, athletes, participants engaged throughout the course of the campaign and the event?
So I'll speak a little bit to that. We actually have a cycling team that in a normal year, we start training in March. And we actually every week we train with these folks and we get them ready, because as anyone in fundraising knows, if you are training for something, especially in a peer-to-peer fundraising, those are the ones who raise the funds. They're the ones who report back to their donors and say, look, I just did, 10 miles in the snow, and they get more money. And again, they're it's very personal. And so that's how we work with our cycling community. Our runners, we do have our own kind of couch to 5K, couch to 10K plan. But a lot of it is we have another team member, Reagan, who actually does a lot of personal reach out. And it's that's kind of her role, is to reach out to these folks and say, you know, I see you're at $250 and you're doing such an amazing job, and you're halfway there to your jersey. And then also with the Great Engaging Networks platform, we actually have auto emails, and I'll let Ashley kind of speak to that as well, for those middle points that are like, you know, you got your first donation, or, you know, you're 50% to goal, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so those consistent touch points, even in a virtual world, I would argue to say are probably more important, because obviously when you're holding a completely in-person event, as a lot of us are used to, is we're kind of all at that point, we're like, okay, let's get to that day. What can we do that day to make it better? And while you had those touch points before in those little bits of emails, people really looked for the event details and then kind of walked away. And so now where we have to kind of reimagine how we're doing that, we're really lucky in Engaging Networks, especially, and just as a whole with the peer-to-peer and the marketing automation, is that we can set up those emails to have those constant touch points that are automatically triggered. So kind of like Jen mentioned, we have one that goes forward for once they reach $50, and it kind of is a wow, way to go, because not everybody fundraises in our stuff, but $50 is a pretty attainable amount for, you know, children who are sending something to their grandma, or somebody that's trying to earn a jersey through our cycling program. And it kind of gives them just that little like, hey, good job. It's not long, but it gives them the hey, good job. It says, you know, you're helping to fund XYZ. Here's some more tips to keep going. And that's what the structure of those emails are. And then we have one through the marketing automation that triggers at $500 for everybody to kind of, or excuse me, a little bit lower than that, to kind of understand like, hey, here's what the fundraising incentives are. Here, you know, did you know that you can earn these? So we're constantly finding ways to educate and continue to engage. And Molly, I'm so glad that you have this page up, because this is our like big toolkit, all of our video resources that are redone, all of our, you know, whether you're participating from a completely virtual front or an in-person front, we attach these in those emails to guide people to these pages, to remind them that fundraising isn't as scary as they think it is. So as we continue to utilize, you know, these guides and forms and the video resources, and I know just because our team doesn't stop going, I'm sure we'll be doing videos for things like this too. So we try to keep everybody engaged in several different fronts so that they don't get bored, especially on the virtual front where you are so used to seeing these things repetitively. We're trying to revisit, reimagine, and give them new things that they haven't seen before.
Yeah, I love it. I've got a question for Patrick as it comes to like, and then Molly too, as it comes to, you know, leading projects like this. So digging in with a group like Huntsman that says, hey, like this is the event now, we want to do this. What are some things that you recommend as people think maybe about undergoing a project like this for their organization? What are some things to know, things to be aware of, things to think through in terms of like who within the organization should be involved? I'd love to hear some tips and things that you both have learned over the years in leading these implementations.
Yeah, I think always, you know, start sooner than you expect to need for any project. My advice to anybody. It always takes longer, but discovery is the most important part. You know, getting the stakeholders in there. You know, everybody wants to see the design. Everybody wants to get started in building and seeing the final product. But the more time you spend in discovery, asking the right questions, you know, bringing in the right stakeholders, and really getting everybody's input, and then also, you know, we talked about like what's the why and how are we going to combine all these events. You know, having, you know, a professional designer, you know, they bring so much wisdom into things, and being able to like talk through that user flow. You know, designers do a lot of magic that like I can't even think about. And then it's also bringing in your developers early on in the process to, you know, think creatively. I think around here, you know, Huntsman came up with this laundry list of all these awesome ideas. There's like, how do we do it? You know, and just bringing in all the minds early on in the process, to really, you know, think through that, and then asking the right questions, because there's always a lot of questions. So, you know, I see my role as a project manager is not only keeping like us on time and on track and on budget, but also making sure I have the right people in the room, and making sure everybody's thinking about things appropriately. Like, you know, asking the right questions is really like my whole goal, is making sure, you know, just keep asking questions, making sure that, you know, they're thinking through everything, because I usually don't have the answers to most of things, you know, but I know the questions to ask to get people to think, to get the right answers. And so, yeah, just talk to your team, have somebody, you know, be the point person, And then also think like longer term, like, okay, you've built this thing, really think through in an early stage, like here's your users, here's your calls to action, how are you then, once this is live, market to them, and how are you going to market to them in specific ways? I mean, you saw Huntsman, they set up the marketing automations, they've set up their auto responders, they have their personal outreach, they have their team leads or their coaches that are reaching out on a personal level. They've thought through all of those steps, and I think that's really vital, because we do see often clients get really excited about the thing, but then don't think about how to actually promote the thing. And I think that takes a lot of time as well. So thinking through that early and making sure that the marketing around that matches those same calls to action that we came up with in discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. The adage of if you build it, they will come doesn't really always happen in peer-to-peer. You got to have a really clear strategy for launch and communication.
Yeah.
Molly, what would you add to that? Maybe from
I think that a lot of organizations, all organizations are structured differently. And a lot of times I never hear, as the technical person, I never hear from the fundraising team. There's like something in between. And I think that where the magic of possibility really happens is when you let your actual fundraisers talk, initially pie in the sky ideas to the solution team, because in between there is where you find out what you really can do, and come up with those new ideas on how to really make things happen. A lot of times the fundraisers are off in this world doing communications, they don't really get to talk to the solution or the vendor with those ideas. And so I think right from the start, let yourself go, have those initial brainstorming meetings, take your history, talk about all those issues and problems and goals with the right people at the table, those people who can actually, come up with the technical solutions based on the tools you have. It doesn't always have to cost a lot. It can be like, what do we have? What are our parameters? And what can we do with what we have and what we know? And a lot of times you can find a solution with what you have and what you know.
Yeah.
I wonder, I've
you
taken
said
so
to
many
bring the
questions
fundraisers
from
in.
Molly.
Yeah.
Probably
Go ahead,
so sick of giving me her number, but but that's exactly what is. I'm like, what if, and if it's not exactly what I'm thinking of, she talks through it, and we understand the program that we're using a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say Huntsman Team internally that maybe you ran into, trying to, maybe get internal buy-in to reinvent the program? Anything? I mean, that's something I hear too from organizations. Well, can't get, Sally over in development to come across and think about this differently. Maybe if it's marketing, right? So how did you cross departments and really kind of bring about the right collaboration to do something like this?
I think we're really fortunate. We have a leader. Our president really trusts us. She trusts that we know our participants are saying. She also has found herself on Facebook, so she's talked to participants herself, which is frightening and good at the same time. And then I feel like kind of the same way with Patrick and Molly. I mean, events and communications are very different, but we have to work together to make it successful. Savannah brings so much to the table that, we graduated in a very different times from college and what we knew. And I do not social media, but that's where, we have these different groups that, do different things. And that's the beauty of bringing a bunch of different people. And it's kind of the same, like what Patrick had mentioned, that, we had two bids and we loved both. And so we merged them together to try to get the best of both worlds. So we've been really fortunate in that regard. But I also feel like our participants are very vocal. And they're very vocal on social media. They're very vocal to us, which is good. You've got to listen to your squeaky wheel. Your squeaky wheel sometimes maybe is a little grating on your nerves, but at the same time, they could bring some really great ideas and at least get you thinking about what can we do to improve the user experience. Because as a participant, they're going to see your event in a totally different way that you never will.
True. And I think too, oh, go ahead, Savannah.
No, go ahead, Ash. You're good.
I think too, recognizing that like it wasn't easy for us to get this. It wasn't easy for us to get the buy-in automatically. And I think, Patrick, you made a really good point in kind of the website stuff overall. Like, we did get really excited for this website, and we got really excited for all these new events. And we continue to be excited at the prospect of holding an in-person event in 2021. And it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy to have to change things. And, Patrick and Molly can totally vouch for that we have basically laid it out for them and then changed it 100% within a day because something has come up that we've had to adapt to. And I think one thing that's really benefited us is as we've gone in and added these things or tried to get the buy-in is that we have had a plan. We've had something that can show like, this is what the cost will be. This is who will be running it. This is, especially some of the pushback we got was kind of, okay, what is this going to do to our staff? Is this going to divide? Is this going to, put more stress on people day of? And it was, something that we could kind of push and say, no, it's not, it might add X, Y, Z, it might add this cost. And at worst case scenario, this could happen, but we did go forward with a plan. And I think that really helped develop the buy-in of the rest of our team. And then once we promoted our participants as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, when our event went virtual in 2020, like a month before our in-person event, we learned so much about our participants, about what motivates them. I think that's the biggest thing we learned from a virtual event, really what motivates them, what they're into, how they train and how they fundraise. So I think for us, although 2020 was so difficult and so hard, it was so helpful in this process of finding those squeaky wheels or finding our brand ambassadors like our Candace Shoup, who came with us with this great idea of high fitness. And now it's an Intermountain West event. It's happening all over the place. We wouldn't have found that event without a virtual event.
Yeah. I love that. Being open to listening to what actually motivates the people who are participating. I've got a quick question. So can we get out there on the snow? Is there an option to ski for this event? No, maybe that's next year.
Well, that's Pink Park City.
It's just it's not attached to it.
Yeah. So I'd like to, we'll open it up for some more questions. If you've got your questions for the group here, please type those into the chat, let us know. But I want to kind of round it out, the conversation, going around the horn with a tip that each of you has for, if an organization is thinking about shaking things up, being agile with their peer-to-peer program. Particularly as we head into this new year where I don't believe there's going to be a lot of in-person stuff still happening. What's one tip that you would leave our audience here with today? Jen, maybe we can start with you.
So kind of a couple, the same as again, listening to your people, listening to your squeaky wheel. They really do have a lot to offer. Another thing so our ride that kind of started our whole athletic thing was a gentleman who came to us and was riding from Reno, Nevada to Utah to kind of celebrate where he came from. And then, finishing where he was treated at Huntsman up here in Salt Lake. And we basically literally for the first event, we invited 50 cyclists. And 50 cyclists that we knew were huge cyclists. They do 140 miles. And we literally had 2 cars and we leapfrogged with food in our cars. And that's how we supported them because we didn't really have, I think we had someone had balloons and ice cream at the end. I mean, it was not a fancy event the first year. But the point was, is this doable? Would this be something the community would wrap their arms around? So I think even doing something like that, where it's a mini something and just, taking your people and just seeing what they would do, because every community is different. I mean, we have people from Washington, D.C. and London and North Carolina. We have people from all over and every community is different, like there could be a ski event in, totally another group. Maybe it's a Blooms run in Washington, D.C. and, something like that, anything that kind of really kind of supports your community. And that's what I would say is just kind of tease some things out there and see what happens. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. I mean, it literally cost a Costco run of $100 worth of food. And that was the first year. And so.
I love that. Savannah, what about you?
You know, I've had the privilege of working on a lot of projects with Firefly, and I know Jen has had the privilege with Zuri. And I think the biggest thing that you often forget is how important that like testing element is of a project, like building a new peer-to-peer site and really taking the time to test and make sure it is what you want it to be. And I think all of us on this project did a lot of that because it was so complex. But I think, and just sharing your feedback, and what I loved about this project too is we don't often get to work as a communications team, events team, and 2 vendors together. And it brought so many individual expertise. And it's actually a model I would carry forward in the future.
Yeah, cool. Ashley, what would you add?
I mean, just to echo what Jen and Sav said, I mean, truly that those pieces are so important, talking to your people and the testing and kind of being able to share that feedback. And I would just add on allowing things to be scary, because obviously I think we can all agree this year has been scary. It has been hard. And we've all, you know, whether you are in events full time and you have events going every month of the year, or whether you have a big spring or a fall campaign or whatever those are, you've probably had to imagine how you do things with your participants and how you do things with your staff to keep everybody safe. And I think allowing things to be scary and exciting and be okay making mistakes and know that people are extending grace for that, and being very vulnerable and listening to when people say, hey, this might not be the best idea, or hey, this didn't work, or hey, I think this could work. And I know we're all kind of holding on right now to try to do the best solution at the best possible time. And right now, I feel like I could argue that nobody really has that best solution right now. And that's where we can come to listen to each other. And sometimes you might have that solution, or you might think you do. And I think this really proved again strong when we worked with, Molly and Patrick and all of our teams, is Jen and I could go in with one solution, and Savannah and the events or the communications team could go in, and then Patrick and Molly, and we all came together with what we thought was the best solution at one time. And all of it got adapted, but it all was such valuable information with different expertise that we were able to make that happen. And we were all able to trust that. So, one person knew very strongly that this might work better, and this small suggestion might adapt this completely. So I think allowing that to be scary and allowing yourself to be a little bit stressed out and pull out of that excitement mode and really be able to look at it kind of from a data driven and kind of the participant side of things. So be scary, be vulnerable. It's hard. It's so hard right now. And Jen can attest that I panic as soon as something changes, but it's been very eye-opening, like Savannah said. And honestly, now's the time. I mean, what other year are you going to get, crossing my fingers, where you can step back from the craziness of planning things and trying to implement these crazy in person and make all these things happen and make sure the pizza shows up at a certain time and the volunteers are there. What other time are you going to have for that? So take that time and go with it.
And to add to that, and what other time do you have grace of your participants and your constituents? That was, again, the world is going through this. It's not just Huntsman. It's not just Utah. It's not just whatever. And that's what has been really interesting is when we come out with anything, we have the people that say, what about, but nobody has been, oh my gosh, that's so stupid, or that's so whatever. Everyone has been very graceful about it, which has been really great. I feel like she's like, to her point, this is a year to innovate.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have one thing to add to that. I mean, in our office, our kind of catchphrase, especially for 2020, is don't let perfect be the enemy for good of good. And I mean, Patrick and the Firefly team, Zuri, get something out there, put something out there, try it, and then do a phase 2, a phase 3. Like you can always build and make it better. And I think that's what we've done with Huntsman SportsFest for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Good things are a long game, right? Molly, what would you add to this?
Oh, just to not limit yourself, bring the right people together in the beginning and brainstorm and let your imagination go. Don't be like, our system doesn't do that, or we can't do that, because there's lots of solutions out there. And then also at the end, follow through with the details, because it doesn't take a lot of time to go back through and fix the little details in your communication plan, in that email someone receives, in the final, what says on the page when it goes through. It's real easy to just kind of go through those details and update that content and make sure things are really usable for people.
Yeah, I love it. And Patrick, Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think just wrapping up with what everybody else said is, again, discovery is super important. You'll never get me to stop saying that. But also just
He's
bringing
right
in,
about that.
like the random people that you don't think would, really should be involved in the project. If you're working on a website rebuild, bring in, the receptionist, because they might not have anything to do with your programs, but they're going to see your project from a different lens and bring really good ideas. You never know where those ideas are going to come from. And you should bring as many stakeholders in those initial discovery calls as possible, because you just don't know who's going to have those good ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Love this advice. I love, Ashley, that you opened up the door to allow things to be scary. I think it's true. A lot of organizations have said, well, how do we go virtual? What do we do? What is everyone doing? And it's like everyone's figuring it out right now. So it takes some time. And I think that sometimes you have to test and get things out there and launch them. And then, Molly, to your point, follow through later with the detail and improve and iterate and improvise. And it's a learning process, and look at as much data as you can ahead of time through discovery and looking at behaviors of your participants from past events, to try to learn what motivates them and what drives them. So this has been really, really good. I really appreciate all of you coming on and having this cool, casual, calm, collected conversation about something that felt scary and felt like a really big undertaking, but you all came together and put all of your brilliant minds together and are ready to launch this thing. So congratulations, everyone. Let's see, what was the cost to create this integrated program? Trisha, good question. We can follow up with you offline on that. I think there's some, varying ways to look at this in terms of cost. There's software's cost, there's implementation costs that you can do on different scales. So Trisha, I'm happy to follow up with you after the fact, and Molly, Patrick, and I can follow up with you too. We are going to be sending out this recording. So if you've got, people that you want to share, maybe you need to get some internal buy-in from at your organization and you want to share this conversation with other people, feel free to share it. We'll be sending out the recording. Any other questions? Feel free to chime them in real quick, and we're here for the next couple minutes. Otherwise, I appreciate your participation today, panelists, and thanks everyone who attended.